So when you want to get involved in this process, and for those that are in the -3s and the -4s, you could bring yourself down. You could bring yourself down from the 4s to the 3s. And who knows, can you eventually get to the 2s? Maybe. And it really depends on if you're able to stop as many factors that are leading to bone loss. Today's episode is going to be short and sweet, yet full of information, and episode to raise awareness or to offer information to kind of get you to think a little deeply. And especially if you have a diagnosis of osteoporosis and even a diagnosis of osteopenia, and you want to do all that you can to stop, slow down, or reverse your bone loss. I titled this episode, How to Stop or Reverse Osteoporosis. And the reason why is because you can do that. A few years ago, when I would say this amongst my peers, they would tell me, you can't say that. Don't say that. You cannot say reverse osteoporosis. Now, many of these people were licensed professionals and they have a license to protect, and it wasn't something that they would feel free to say. Yet I was running all of these labs on women and guiding women to take charge of their bone health naturally through supplements, diets, better sleep, stress management, movement. And they were reversing bone loss and reversing osteoporosis. If you go below -2.5 into the -2.4, you no longer have a diagnosis of osteoporosis. So for those ladies that I have that are now in the 2.4s or 2.3s, that's called reversing that disease. Not only are you reversing the disease, if one DEXA scan to the next, you actually see a decrease in your number. You even have more positive gain than that, because on average, we lose at a minimum 1% of bone loss annually. So if you're able to have a DEXA score and then 2 years later have it go down or even stay the same, then you've reversed bone loss, because there's a natural process of bone loss that happens. And then if you see these numbers, then you know that you've changed that. So let's discuss osteoporosis, bone metabolism, what it is and what you have control over. How do you stop it, slow it down, and even reverse it? The process of bone building or breakdown is called remodeling, building, dissolving, building, dissolving. And all day, every day, there are many things that are going to have an effect on this process, things that are in your control, many. And when you learn what are those things that you can control, then you stop the contributing factors of bone loss. And if you have enough control and you take charge on as many as possible, then you stop those contributing factors to bone loss. When we leave our 30s, the process slows down naturally. So there's a natural process of aging, right? There's a natural, we lose things as we age. We get wrinkles on the outside, we see it. So on the outside, we see things that are changing. On the inside, we have wrinkles too. Wrinkles on the inside are the natural process of aging the way we see it on the outside. And sometimes those lead to disease states, as in the case of osteoporosis, because osteoporosis is the disease state of bone loss. Osteopenia is the state before. And the determining criteria for that disease diagnosis is when your DEXA scan score shows a -2.5. So when you're at -2.4, you're not yet there. -2.5 is that disease state, and that's where that term comes from. So when you want to get involved in this process, and for those that are in the -3s and the -4s, you could bring yourself down. You could bring yourself down from the 4s to the 3s. And who knows, can you eventually get to the 2s? Maybe. And it really depends on if you're able to stop as many factors that are leading to bone loss. So inside the body, you are either upregulating or downregulating. You are either turning on switches or turning off switches. You're either stimulating bone building or stimulating bone dissolving. Those are all the terms. And when we do studies and research, we're looking for factors that stimulate the bone building process or factors that are stimulating the bone breakdown. So, what we want to do is identify as many factors in our lives that are contributing to the bone breakdown. What is keeps triggering that? What keeps stimulating that? There are some large pillars that we have to focus on when it comes to health, when it comes to all aspects of health, healthy aging, healthy bones. And those are diet, sleeping, maximizing our sleep, stress management, movement, and especially the appropriate movement when it comes to bones, because it's not just about moving. And as a yoga therapist, teaching yoga therapy for osteoporosis to thousands of women over the years, I have watched and observed women coming into these postures where they believe that they're going down as far or that they're coming into it. Let me back up. Everyone thinks they need to go down far. Everyone thinks they need to put their hand on the ground or go down as far as possible. But what usually happens is if you don't have the flexibility and strength to go down far in your hip joint, where we want that stimulation to the bones or the pelvis or the spine, and you start to bend your spine, typically the upper spine, typically the most precarious, fragile part of the spine, then what happens is you're not creating the appropriate stimulation in the right places. So movement is not just about throwing your bag of bones around. That's the term I use when I teach. Don't just throw your bag of bones around. You have to do it properly. So those large pillars of diet, deep restorative, reparative, bone building sleep, movement and the appropriate movement, and stress management and supplementation and having a purpose or a reason or hope or something in your life. So all of these big pillars exist for all aspects of health. When we start to get into bones and we want to stop bone loss, then you need to look metabolically, biochemically, physiologically, because that is where it's happening in the deepest part of you, your reserves, your mineral reserves, or your bones. We need to look at how can we have an effect on our metabolic processes. And this is where we have to then look deeper at things like digestion. And are you digesting properly? And is the food going from your stomach into the intestines in the right pH and appropriate breakdown? So did you break the food down in the right amount, and is it the right pH to further to support that process? And then when you get there, do you have a leaky gut or do you have an intact gut lining? And do you have the appropriate microbes in your, so it's this whole entire process of what's happening in this whole system. And you start to look at how can I have better access to turning on bone building from a metabolic, biochemical, physiological perspective. This is where functional labs are tremendously helpful, because you actually get to see in your body where there are issues or hurdles or things that are either triggering or upregulating bone breakdown cells versus stimulating the bone building cells. So looking at functional labs gives us a really good indication of what's happening inside your body. And even if you didn't have access to those functional labs, supporting metabolism, the bone building, doing this through diet, making sure that what you're eating is bone building food, and asking yourself every time you sit down to a meal or you open the refrigerator or you go to the store to purchase, is this bone building or bone dissolving? That has been one of the things that a lot of women tell me. Sorry. Are you building or are you dissolving? And every single thing you do all day long is contributing to this process. So when you get a diagnosis, you can be so scared and worried and hopeless and looking for answers. There's so much information out there. This thing and that thing, this supplement, that supplement. You could take a supplement that you think is bone building, but if you have all these leaks around you, then that one little thing is not going to contribute overall to bone building if you have so much dissolving going around. You have to identify your dissolving factors and identify what are bone building factors. I think that we look so much for the bone building factors. What supplements can I take? Should I take vitamin D? If so, how much? Do I take calcium? I only put about 40 to 50% of the ladies that I work on, or sorry, work with, and I work with a lot of women on calcium. Almost most I don't, because I find that they're not utilizing calcium properly, or they're dissolving their bones to release the calcium that's in their bones. And let's stop that bone dissolving process so you keep what you have. Because if you're eating ample amounts of calcium in your diet, good calcium, not fortified milk, not dairy, because that's not going to give us the calcium we need. And that's triggering inflammation, which is leading, that's a bone loss, bone loss. So if you're people are focusing so much on what can I bring in? Can I take this supplement? Is this supplement good? That should I do strontium? Should I do calcium? Should I do this? So there's a lot of focus on let me bring in the things I think are going to focus on bone building. And that's of course something we need to focus on. But we really need to go into the bone dissolving and stop that, stop the leaks where they're happening. And if we put more emphasis on getting deep restorative sleep, managing our stress, and really understanding what that means. How are you showing up in this game of life every single day? What are you consuming with your senses? What are you watching? What are you listening to? What are you eating? What are you hearing? All of that. So if we focus more on stopping the dissolving, now the only tool in the toolbox in Western medicine, and it's what you're going to be recommended by most physicians, because I talk to women all the time, and this is the biggest complaint. My doctor says I have severe osteoporosis, and I ask them, well, what is your number? And they'll say, oh, negative 2.5 or 2.6. And I'm like, what? That's considered severe? There's many other factors that go into that. He wants me to go on this thing or this thing. Well, you know what's crazy? They just took one of the biggest medications off the market. Why? Because it creates spontaneous femur fractures. Femur bone, leg bone, the bone we're trying to build up. This medication that we've had on the market for what, 20 plus years is contributing to fractures, which is why we thought we were taking it. So unfortunately, conventional medicine can really not manage. Well, actually, it can manage osteoporosis, which is what it tries to do. It tries to say, here's a disease state, here's the pill to try to get it to move a little. But it's not at all focusing on the leaks. Why are you losing that bone in the first place? So conventional medicine, unfortunately, cannot manage bone health. This is such, well, manage is the wrong word, right? Western medicine cannot give you the control. It cannot solve the problem of osteoporosis. Let's say that, okay? Because that's something that I feel really okay saying. So that's the only tool that exists. And that's we're getting diagnosed by the endocrinologist or by the regular physicians. We're getting these DEXA scan scores, getting this diagnosis, and then it's here's the medication. And I meet women all the time that are so frustrated. They don't want to take medication. I don't want to take a medication. I'm not going to rely on a medication. I'm going to do everything I can before that. So what do? You have to look at your loss. If you want to stop bone loss, reverse osteoporosis, stop the loss. Where is your loss? If you focus on finding your loss, what's contributing to your loss, that's how you reverse it, right? If you're no longer losing, if you're no longer contributing to the loss, then you'll stop it. So instead of thinking, let me take this supplement, kale might be good, or is it? Oxalates, phytates, anti-nutrients, a whole other topic, whole other podcast episode on that. All of the things, what do I take? What do I take? No. Why are you losing bone? What are you how are you contributing metabolically, physiologically in your body to bone loss? When you can identify these factors, that is when you can start to turn the ship around. I like to say that term because it's like a big cruise ship. You don't just stop your bone loss today. I mean, yes, if you stop bringing in those factors, but metabolism and physiology and biochemistry doesn't just shift, because there's a lot of habits and contributing factors, and you need to learn what those are. I have a quiz about identifying root causes of bone loss. I'd love you to take that on my website. I've broken those questions down into the 7 main categories, and the symptoms that are related or linked to potential areas that you could focus on to stop the loss, turn off bone loss. That's what we need to focus on, turning off bone loss. And this is why I focus a lot of my work on helping women heal their guts, to make sure that because that's a big area where a lot of loss is. If you want to look for the first place you want to look, if you want to look under the cover to say, ooh, where is the bone loss for me? Look at your gut, because your gut is when the outside world becomes the inside world. And there's a lot of root causes and causal factors residing in that part of your body. So to reverse bone loss, reverse osteoporosis, we need to stop the loss in the first place. And if we identify the factors of bone loss, that is how you will get to that factor. And then the other one, I'll always say this, even while you're trying to identify your bone loss, you still can focus on bone building and bone building stimulation. And that comes from, in the work that I do, is yoga therapy. We could walk that gets some, you could do weight resistance training at the gym, but you need to work with someone that, or yourself if you know this, that knows how to appropriately contribute the stimulation to the right places, because it's not just about pumping iron. It's not just about squatting and doing it. You have to direct the forces to the areas that are important for our bone health. So for me, yoga therapy, nothing else in the world like it. Stronger joints, stronger balance, alignment, posture, bone stimulation, muscle strength, bone strength, joint strength. It will secrete fluids, keep you flexible, mobile, help you be bendable and not breakable, help you be a better faller, because we're not going to stop falling. We're going to fall. But how can we be better at it so we don't break? Bendable, not breakable. And so to me, yoga therapy, even before you, or in conjunction with finding your leaks and your loss, add yoga therapy into your life for osteoporosis. Add that in, and the foods and all that other stuff, but create the bone stimulation every day. It could be a practice, or it could be the way you move every day. So where are your leaks? If you want to learn how to stop bone loss, stop osteoporosis, or reverse bone loss, reverse osteoporosis, find your loss, find your leaks. And in the meantime, practice daily movement, yoga therapy postures that are going to strengthen alignment, posture, balance, improve flexibility, muscle building movement, muscle and bone building movement, so that you start contributing right away to strengthen all those areas. And it really is about a stronger bones lifestyle. This is not just a vitamin or a diet. It is a lifestyle to reverse bone loss, reverse osteoporosis, and to have stronger bones for life. It's a lifestyle. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. I have programming on everything that I've spoke about today. I'd love you to join my community of women just like me, and hopefully just like you, that want to be the happiest, healthiest versions of ourselves as we age naturally. Au natural. Thank you so much for listening to Stronger Bones Lifestyle Podcast. Bone loss is not an inevitable part of aging. We don't have to just wait for it to happen. There is so much that you can do. And that is what you will learn each week on the show. Go to my website, debirobinson.com, if you want more information about what was shared in today's episode. At the bottom of this episode in the show notes, there will be links to whatever was shared. Please subscribe to this podcast. Share this podcast with your friends, your family, or any women that you think may be interested or benefit from the information we're sharing. Please rate the podcast. And if you have any questions you'd like asked or answered, I would love to hear from you. Let's do this, ladies. Let's change the way the world views osteoporosis and slow down, stop, or reverse our bone loss, take charge, and show other ladies what is possible. Thank you so much for joining me.